Hey y'all. So for today's video, I'm going to talk a little bit about figured bass and staircase chord progressions. And this is just something I've been working on, taking a little bit of break from the guitar just so that I can reset myself. Anyways, figured bass. It's kind of interesting. It's a way to write down notation to kind of tell you from just a bass note how to construct triads or seventh chords with respect to the relative interval above the bass note. So for instance, if you have a 1-4-5 progression, for instance, and we just look at the one chord, the major triad. In root inversion, you have a 1, a 3, and a 5. So for instance, if you put the Roman numeral 1 down, the root inversion would be written as a 1, 3, and a 5, as shown here. Or usually it's written with no numbers by the side. And the 3 just means that it's a third above the bass, and the 5 means it's a fifth above the bass. Well, then if you wanted to, you could put the first inversion triad, which means that you have the third in the bass. So that's written like so. Now, what you would write is the chord itself, the 1, and then you would have the number 3 and the 6 above it. And that means that you have the bass note, and then you write a third above it and a sixth above it. Or in shorthand, it's often written as just 1, 6, as shown on the screen. And then the second inversion, you can guess, would be probably a 1, a 4, and a 6. And so that inversion is not abbreviated, actually. It's just 1, 4, 6. And that's with the fourth or the fifth in the bass. And so that's how figured bass looks like for triads. But you can also do these for sevenths. So for instance, right here, you would have a seventh dominant or a seventh chord, and that is just written as a 7, because it's a root inversion, and that says that it's a seventh chord. So sometimes these numbers can be a little bit confusing because this is a seventh chord, but it doesn't mean you're just putting the seventh interval. So you have your root position, seventh chord, or you can do your first inversion, which is written as 1, 5, and 6. And then you can do a second inversion, which is written as 1, 3, 4, or your third inversion, which is written as a 1, 2, 4. Now there's an interesting way that you can memorize this, and you can basically write it as a phone number, as you can see here in the screen. If you remember these phone numbers, you'll know your triad and your seventh figured bass. Now the usefulness of figured bass is shorthand notation for Baroque type music, but also just as a general way of understanding how bass lines move. So from these, you can basically use inversions in a 1-4-5 progression to create what's known as a staircase chord progression. A chord progression that sounds like it's keeping on moving upwards all the time. And so if you have a 1 chord in the key of C, you have the roots or the notes C, E, and G. And if you go to the fourth, you have C, F, and A, or F, A, C. And if you move to the fifth, you have G, B, and D as your notes. And all those notes are all the notes that are in the C major scale. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to figure out a way to use the 1, 4s, and the 5s to construct an interesting chord progression that has an ascending bass line. And so for this, I will start with the 4. And then on the next one, we want to figure out an ascending bass line. Well, we can do that with just the root of the 5. And then we want the next bass line to be A. Well, we can do that with an inversion. So if we click over here and look at the different inversions, well, we have another 4 with the first inversion. So we can just use this one right here. Now we want a B, right? So let's look at the inversions. Well, there's a 5 with a B in the first inversion. So now we want another chord, and we want to go up to C, right? So we could do the 1, but it doesn't sound very cool. And we want to keep the note changing in the higher ranges to be as small as possible for this effect to work. And there's better ways of doing it, but this is the way that I figured out. So if we look here, we have this one right here where we can say, we can go back down to a 4, and there's a C in the bass. So that's a second inversion. So the next chord we'd like would have a D in the bass. So if we do a first inversion, we can see that there is no 4 or 5 with the D in the bass, but the second inversion will have a 5 with the D in the bass. So this is what we'll use here. And then the 7th, we want that to resolve back to the 4th nicely. And so we want that to have an E by using the first inversion of the 1. And so that's the only option that we have for that. And then it will resolve nicely back to F. So let's listen what that sounds like. So you can kind of hear the staircase chord progression where it keeps going up and up. Like I said, there are better ways to do this, but I am not the most familiar with how to do that. So if you guys know of any better way of doing that, using other chord progression types or tricks, I think there's other videos online that go into building staircase chord progressions that actually sounds like they just keep going up and up and up. It's kind of an audio illusion. But this is kind of the basics of it, you know, setting a rising bass line using inversions. Anyways, that's my video for the week. Have a good one.